Flying is one of the fastest and most efficient ways to reach very faraway destinations. Planes take us across the sky, through the clouds, and connect the world in a matter of hours. However, have we ever thought about something like, what if this plane has a problem? What if there is a terrible accident? Welcome back to Crash Viz. In this video I will share a story about a real accident or real incident of a plane. To listen. Atlas Air Flight 3591. February 23, 2019. Atlas Air Flight 3591 will approach to George Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston, Texas, United States. It was a cargo flight, operated by a virtual cargo airline working exclusively to transport Amazon packages, named Amazon Prime Air by Atlas Air. There were no passengers on board the plane, only 3 crew members were on duty. 60 years old Captain Ricky Blakely from Indiana, he logged a total of 11,172 flight hours. 44 years old Antiguan man, First Officer Conrad Jules Aska, he had logged 5,073 flight hours. Additionally, Captain Sean Archuleta from Houston and from Mesa Airlines joined the flight too. The type of aircraft used in the cargo flight is a Boeing 767-375ER Boeing converted freighter. That's the cargo version of the Boeing 767. The aircraft is registered as N1217A. The aircraft has the name Custom Air Obsession, and its age at that time was 27 years old. The plane originally took off from Miami International Airport in Florida at 11:33 in the morning, and it was scheduled to fly to George Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston, Texas. At 12:30 in the afternoon, the crew contacted Houston approach from 18,000 feet, 73 miles out. Storms were lying ahead, so the air traffic controller gave vectors around the weather. The flight checked in with Houston Terminal Radar Approach Control, reporting they were descending via the Lynx waypoint at approximately 17,800 feet and 320 knots. The controller warned of light to heavy precipitation ahead and asked if they'd like vectors around it. The crew responded affirmatively, indicating they'd like to go west of the weather. The air traffic controller then instructed them to expedite descent to 3,000 feet to facilitate that westward routing. The controllers issued a heading of 270 degrees approved by Flight 3591 as they descended through 8,500 feet. Air traffic controller advised they'd be past the weather in about 18 miles, and that conditions were clear to the west, enabling a base leg route toward runway 26 left. Captain Blakely acknowledged with, "Sounds good," and began configuring the flight management system and setting flaps to 1 while continuing descent. The autopilot and go-around mode inadvertently engaged as the aircraft was at 6,300 feet during descent, without any air traffic controller interaction. The crew did not question or announce a go-around. Meanwhile, air traffic controller is reassuring the crew that weather ahead is very clear. Captain Blakely acknowledged with, "Okay." As the aircraft entered the cold front and turbulence, speed brakes retracted and a rapid increase in thrust and nose-up pitch occurred, automated by go-around. Air traffic controller remained unaware of the unfolding crisis and continued normal communications. The controller is informing the crew that in 18 miles, they'll be directed to turn northbound, setting them up for a base leg. Captain Blakely acknowledges this without issue. Then, the autopilot's caution beeper sounded. The controllers reiterated that weather conditions were excellent on the approach route. First Officer Aska is perceiving a stall and asked where the speed was. The nose of the plane went down, rapidly overriding the autopilot, and initiated a dive. The aircraft accelerated into a dive at high airspeed with extreme G-forces. At 12:39 p.m., Flight 3591 crashed into the water at Trinity Bay, 41 miles east-southeast of George Bush Intercontinental Airport. The crash site was found around 12:45 p.m. Central Standard Time that same day, in a marshy area of Trinity Bay near Anahuac, about 40 miles from Houston George Bush Intercontinental Airport. Debris spread over 3/4 mile. Sadly, all 3 crew members who were on board lost their lives in the accident. A joint effort involving the Coast Guard, the local sheriff's office, the FBI, the NTSB, and a number of volunteers carried out search and recovery operations. These missions used boats and diver teams to navigate some pretty tough muddy terrain. On February 24th, Atlas Air set up a family assistance center near Houston and sent their CEO along with support teams to help the families and loved ones affected by the tragedy. Both Atlas Air and Amazon made public statements, really focusing on offering condolences, working closely with authorities, and making sure the well-being of the families was a top priority. The cockpit voice recorder was recovered that same evening, while the flight data recorder was found between the next day and the day after. Initial analysis of the recorders showed that, in the final 18 seconds, there was a sudden and total loss of control. February 26th, all 3 victims were recovered and the wreckage was heavily fragmented. At December 19, 2019, the National Transportation Safety Board released an initial public docket containing 3,000 pages of factual data, including FDR and CVR transcripts, air traffic controller logs, photos, and witness statements. At July 14, 2020, in a public hearing, the National Transportation Safety Board concluded the crash resulted from the first officer's inadvertent toga activation, resulting spatial disorientation, aggressive nose-down inputs, and the captain's failure to intervene. The board also criticized industry reliance on incomplete pilot records and inadequate background checks. It was most likely that the first officer inadvertently triggered the go-around mode, maybe by striking the switch with his wrist or wristwatch while manipulating the speed brake lever in turbulence, and neither pilot recognized nor verbally acknowledged the change in automation mode. The captain failed to adequately oversee the flight path, and did not intervene or take positive control in time, as the first officer forced the airplane into a steepening dive. Investigators identified that the first officer had a long history of training and performance deficiencies which he deliberately concealed from prior employers, and that Atlas Air's reliance on inadequate background checks failed to flag his unsuitability. The National Transportation Safety Board issued 6 new safety recommendations focused on improving pilot hiring practices and performance record transparency. They also called for enhancing training for recognizing and recovering from automation surprises and, importantly, strengthening oversight of pilot background checks and compliance with FAA pilot records database mandates. The investigation reignited broader scrutiny of pilot competence, training fatigue, and the importance of robust record-keeping in aviation safety. The crash of Atlas Air Flight 3591 underscores how the interplay of automation complexity, human sensory illusions, flight crew interaction, and institutional call-outs can culminate in disaster when checks and safeguards fail at multiple levels. Thank you for watching this video. You can give a like to this video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel as a form of your support for the development of this channel. If you want to request, you can comment below, and I promise to make the video. Thank you and see you at next video.